The Drake downfall conversation is getting louder by the day, and what once sounded like internet exaggeration is now starting to feel impossible to ignore. For years, Drake has been untouchable. Chart dominance, sold-out tours, cultural influence, and an image that felt permanent. No matter the controversy, he always seemed to bounce back stronger. But lately, something has shifted. The energy is different. The tone around his name has changed. And fans are starting to ask a question that would have been unthinkable just a short time ago. Is Drake actually losing his grip on the top? It's not one single moment causing this. It's the build-up, missed moments, questionable decisions, public clashes that didn't land the way they used to. The same strategies that once guaranteed dominance now feel predictable, even desperate to some critics. Where Drake used to control the narrative effortlessly, now he's constantly reacting. And in hip-hop, reacting instead of leading is the first sign of vulnerability. What's really fueling this conversation is how the culture is responding. Newer artists aren't just chasing Drake's lane anymore, they are challenging it. Veterans aren't quiet either. Subtle disses, indirect comments, and strategic silence from rivals have created an atmosphere where Drake no longer feels feared, just familiar. And familiarity is dangerous in an industry that thrives on reinvention. Fans have also noticed the cracks. Albums that once felt like events now spark debates instead of celebration. Songs trend, but the impact doesn't last the same way. Social media, once Drake's playground, has turned into a battlefield where every move is dissected and every lyric questioned. The memes are harsher, the criticism is louder, and the defense from supporters isn't as unified as it used to be. What makes this moment so wild is that Drake is still successful. But success alone isn't enough anymore. In hip-hop, perception is everything. And right now, the perception is shifting fast. This doesn't look like a sudden collapse. It looks like erosion. Slow, public, and hard to reverse. So the real question isn't whether Drake has fallen yet. It's whether we're watching the beginning of something he's never had to face before. And if history tells us anything, hip-hop never waits for anyone to catch up. For over a decade, Drake didn't just dominate hip-hop, he defined it. Every era, every sound shift, every wave of popularity somehow ran through him. From emotional introspection to club anthems, from streaming records to cultural moments, Drake positioned himself as the center of gravity in rap. If something was hot, Drake touched it. If an artist was rising, Drake co-signed it. If a sound went mainstream, Drake had already monetized it. That's why what's happening now feels so shocking. Not because Drake suddenly disappeared, but because the fear factor is gone. And in hip-hop, that's everything. The conversation around Drake has quietly changed. It's no longer how long will he stay on top, but why doesn't this hit the same anymore? That shift didn't happen overnight. It crept in through subtle disappointments, lukewarm reactions, and moments that felt slightly off. Albums that once shut down the internet now split fan bases. Songs that used to feel timeless now feel engineered for algorithms. Drake is still everywhere, but being everywhere doesn't mean being untouchable. One of the biggest warning signs is how Drake now releases music defensively rather than confidently. In earlier years, his drops felt intentional, even inevitable. Now, releases often feel reactive, responding to critics, internet narratives, or rival momentum. When an artist starts explaining themselves more than expressing themselves, it signals pressure. Drake has always been calculated, but calculation without surprise drains excitement. Fans sense that. The culture senses that. Another crack forming is Drake's identity problem. For years, he balanced multiple lanes: the rapper, the pop star, the introspective poet, the tough guy. That versatility was his superpower. But today, critics argue that the balance is broken. When Drake leans tough, it feels forced. When he leans emotional, it feels repetitive. When he leans pop, it feels safe. The authenticity that once made his music relatable is now being questioned, not because he changed, but because the audience did. Then there's the generational shift. Hip-hop is no longer waiting for Drake to lead it. New artists aren't asking for permission or chasing his blueprint. They are actively rejecting it. They are raw, unpredictable, messy, and culturally in tune in ways that feel more immediate. Drake, by contrast, feels polished to a fault. In an era obsessed with realness, over-curation becomes a liability. The beefs haven't helped either. Where Drake once emerged untouched from conflicts, recent moments haven't landed cleanly. Subliminal shots go unanswered. Direct challenges don't scare opponents. Rivals gain credibility just by standing next to his name. That's a major shift. At one point, Drake mentioning you felt like validation. Now, people are daring him to respond, and that alone changes the power dynamic. Social media has amplified everything. Drake built part of his empire by mastering internet culture early, but the same platforms now magnify every misstep. Lyrics are screenshot, mocked, memed, and reinterpreted instantly. Fans who once defended him unconditionally now debate his relevance openly. Even praise feels cautious. That kind of hesitation spreads fast. What makes this moment especially dangerous is that Drake is still commercially successful. Streams are high, tours sell, but cultural dominance isn't measured in numbers alone anymore. It's measured in impact, respect, and momentum. And that's where the decline feels real. The music still plays, but it doesn't move the culture the way it used to. Drake used to set the tone. Now he's responding to it. This isn't a collapse, it's erosion. And erosion is harder to fight because there's no single enemy, no clear villain, just time, changing taste, and rising expectations. Drake isn't failing. He's facing something new, a culture that no longer revolves around him. And the scariest part? Hip-hop doesn't slow down for legends. It replaces them quietly. This is only the beginning of the conversation, and it explains why so many people believe the Drake downfall isn't coming. It's already started. What's happening to Drake right now isn't just about music. It's about control slipping away. For years, Drake didn't follow the culture. He steered it. He decided what sound mattered, which artists broke through, and what conversations dominated hip-hop. But now, for the first time, that grip feels weaker. And when power fades quietly, it's far more dangerous than a loud fall. Inside the industry, the shift is undeniable. There was a time when labels, streaming platforms, and radio revolved their schedules around Drake releases. Now, the machine has changed. Algorithms don't care about legacy, emotion, or history. They care about engagement. Explaining yourself looks like pressure, and pressure is starting to show. Authenticity has also become a growing question. Drake built his empire on emotional honesty, vulnerability that felt real, raw, and relatable. But when the same themes repeat without evolution, even honesty can start to feel recycled. Fans aren't accusing him of being fake. They're questioning whether the story has reached its limit. His image is another issue. Drake once balanced multiple identities effortlessly. The rapper, the hitmaker, the boss, the outsider. Now, that balance feels fractured. When an artist tries to be everything at once, it can start to look like uncertainty rather than versatility. The audience senses it. And in hip-hop, clarity is power. Competition has also changed. Drake isn't being challenged by equals anymore. He's being surrounded by a generation that isn't afraid of him. New artists don't see Drake as a threat. They see him as a milestone they are meant to pass. That psychological shift is massive. Fear once protected Drake. Now, indifference is replacing it. His reactions reveal the strain. More captions, more indirect lines, more attempts to steer perception. Drake used to dominate through absence. Now he feels present in moments that don't need explanation. When an artist starts managing narratives instead of creating them, the balance tilts. Fan behavior has shifted too. Criticism used to be rare and defensive. Now it's open, casual, and constant. Support still exists, but it's no longer unconditional. The shield has cracks, and once the fan base splits, the aura changes permanently. None of this means Drake is finished, but it does mean he's no longer untouchable. He's no longer the center everyone orbits around. He's now part of a crowded race where momentum matters more than history. The most dangerous sign isn't hate, it's the lack of anticipation. The culture no longer waits for Drake's next move. It reacts after the fact. And anticipation is what turns stars into legends. Right now, Drake isn't just making music. He's defending relevance. And in hip-hop, playing defense has never been a winning position. One of the clearest signs of a shift in power is how the audience behaves. And right now, Drake's audience doesn't move the way it used to. There was a time when his fans acted as a shield, defending every lyric, every move, every controversy. That shield isn't gone, but it's thinner. Louder critics slip through it now. Jokes stick longer. Doubt lingers instead of disappearing. And once doubt becomes normal, the ground underneath any superstar starts to soften. The internet has played a major role in this transformation. Social media used to amplify Drake's dominance. Memes celebrated him. Quotes from his songs became captions. Screenshots of lyrics felt iconic. Now, those same platforms flip his moments into punchlines. Lyrics are dissected with skepticism instead of admiration. Lines that once felt confident are reframed as corny. Even when the criticism isn't fully fair, repetition makes it powerful. Online culture doesn't need to be right. It just needs to be loud and consistent. Another issue is fatigue. Drake has been present for so long, so consistently, that absence now feels refreshing while his presence feels expected. That's a dangerous place for any artist, especially one whose power relied on momentum. When drops feel routine instead of exciting, attention shifts naturally. Fans don't turn away out of hate. They drift out of curiosity. And drifting is harder to stop than backlash. There's also a growing gap between Drake and the emotional state of the culture. Hip-hop goes through cycles, and right now, listeners crave authenticity, risk, and unpredictability. They want artists who sound like they have something to lose. Drake sounds like someone who has already won everything. That creates distance. Success, once aspirational, can eventually become isolating if it isn't recontextualized. The younger audience especially feels less connected. For them, Drake isn't the voice of a generation. He's the soundtrack of their childhood. That sounds like respect, but it carries a hidden problem. Nostalgia doesn't drive obsession. It creates appreciation, not loyalty. New artists speak their language directly, in real time, without polish. Drake's refinement, once elite, now feels detached to listeners who want chaos and immediacy. Even Drake's confidence doesn't land the same. Bragging hits hardest when people believe it's still being earned. When success feels permanent, confidence starts to sound like maintenance instead of hunger. Hip-hop responds to hunger. It rewards struggle. Drake's challenge is that he can't fake that edge, and audiences can tell when an artist is reaching for it. What's also noticeable is how quickly conversations move past him. A Drake release might trend for a day or two, but then attention shifts elsewhere. Another artist says something bold. Another song sparks debate. Another moment captures the culture's imagination. Drake is present, but is no longer the gravitational center. And gravity is what once made everything revolve around him. This doesn't mean Drake lacks influence. It means influence has become shared, fragmented, and unstable. In that environment, dominance is harder to maintain. Drake built his empire in an era where being the biggest voice mattered most. Today's era rewards being the most compelling voice, and that changes weekly. There's also an emotional exhaustion happening. Drake's narratives, betrayal, loyalty, romance, ego, have been told so many times that even fans struggle to feel surprised. When art stops surprising people, it stops commanding attention. Consistency becomes predictability, and predictability becomes background noise. Perhaps the most telling sign is that Drake is now part of debates instead of conclusions. He used to end arguments. Now he starts them. Fans compare. Critics analyze. Rivals feel emboldened. Being debated is still relevance, but it's not dominance. Hip-hop has always been ruthless with time. It doesn't announce transitions. It doesn't hold ceremonies. It simply shifts focus. One day you're the moment. The next day you're part of the conversation about moments. Drake hasn't disappeared, but the spotlight doesn't linger the way it once did. And in this culture, attention is currency. Once it starts spreading elsewhere, getting it back requires reinvention, not repetition. Drake is standing at that crossroads now, not between success and failure, but between evolution and erosion. The next moves matter more than any chart position ever could. Because hip-hop doesn't crown kings forever. It watches to see who adapts and who fades into history while still standing. Another layer to what's happening with Drake is psychological, and it's something most superstars eventually face: the burden of longevity. Staying on top for a long time doesn't just change how the audience sees you, it changes how you see yourself. Drake built his career on self-awareness, but when success stretches across eras, self-awareness can quietly turn into self-protection. Risk starts to feel unnecessary. Experimentation, that safety shows up in the music. The structures are familiar. The flows are polished. The themes are controlled. Nothing sounds bad, but nothing feels urgent. Urgency is what once made Drake magnetic. He sounded like someone chasing something, even while winning. Now, the chase is gone, and without it, the energy shifts. Great artists don't just make good music. They make music that feels like it needs to exist. There's also the pressure of legacy. When an artist reaches Drake's level, every move is judged against their peak. That can freeze creativity. Instead of asking, "What do I feel?" the question becomes, "How will this be received?" That internal filter is deadly. Fans can sense when art is cautious. It feels engineered instead of lived in. Drake's relationship with criticism has changed too. Early on, he absorbed it and evolved. Now, criticism seems to linger. Subtle responses show up in lyrics, captions, interviews. That doesn't mean he's insecure. It means the noise is louder than it used to be. And when an artist hears too many voices at once, the original voice gets diluted. Another issue is saturation beyond music. Drake is everywhere: fashion, sports, business, memes, endorsements. That level of visibility used to strengthen his brand. Now it competes with his artistry. When an artist becomes a constant presence, the music stops feeling like an event. It becomes part of the background of a larger persona. There's also a noticeable shift in how peers treat him. Silence can speak louder than disses. Artists who once mentioned Drake openly now move independently. Collaborations feel strategic rather than organic. Respect remains, but reverence fades. That's subtle. But in hip-hop, subtle shifts define eras. Drake's dominance relied heavily on emotional connection. Fans felt like they grew with him. But time changes that relationship. The artist evolves, but the audience evolves faster. When that emotional alignment breaks, no amount of hits can fully repair it. Connection can't be forced. What complicates everything is that Drake still performs at an elite level. He can rap. He can make hits. He can sell out arenas. That makes the decline harder to define. Because it's not a collapse, it's a plateau. And plateaus are dangerous because they feel comfortable until they suddenly aren't. Hip-hop history is full of artists who stayed great but lost their grip on the moment. They weren't replaced by one person. They were replaced by the culture moving forward. That's the pattern Drake is brushing against now. Not rejection, but progression. Another quiet factor is expectation fatigue. When people expect greatness every time, greatness stops feeling special. Drake created his own ceiling, and now everything is measured against it. Even solid work feels underwhelming when history is that heavy. The industry doesn't announce when it's done building around you. It just slowly stops adjusting to you. Release windows tighten. Media reactions cool. Headlines soften. That's happening now, subtly, but clearly. Drake isn't losing because he lacks talent. He's facing the hardest opponent in music: time. Time doesn't care about numbers, streams, or past wins. It only responds to reinvention. Right now, Drake stands in a space few artists ever reach. Powerful, respected, but no longer central. What happens next depends on whether he's willing to let go of what worked and step into uncertainty again. Because in hip-hop, safety never creates legends. And the moment an artist chooses comfort over risk is the moment the culture starts choosing someone else. Every era in hip-hop ends the same way. Not with a headline, not with an announcement, but with a feeling. A subtle realization that something has changed. Drake's situation feels exactly like that. Nothing has ended, yet the energy no longer moves through him the way it once did. The culture hasn't turned against him, It has simply grown comfortable without him at the center. What makes this moment unique is that Drake is still winning on paper. The charts still respond. The tours still sell. The brand still shines. But culture isn't built on numbers alone. It's built on obsession, on moments that feel unavoidable. Drake used to create those moments naturally. Now, they have to be manufactured, and manufactured moments never last. There's also a sense that Drake has become predictable emotionally. Listeners know the tone before the track plays. They can anticipate the themes, the cadence, the mood. That familiarity dulls impact. Hip-hop thrives on surprise, on moments that make people pause, rewind, and argue. Drake's music still plays, but it rarely interrupts the culture anymore. Another defining shift is how risk has disappeared from his work. Risk doesn't mean failure, it means uncertainty. Early Drake embraced it. He took chances with sound, vulnerability, and direction. Now, his music feels insulated, protected, designed not to lose rather than to challenge. That mindset may preserve relevance, but it doesn't generate dominance. The culture has also changed its relationship with stars. Audiences today don't idolize the same way they once did. They move quickly. They replace icons without ceremony. Drake rose during an era of long attention spans and fewer voices. Today's landscape is louder, faster, and less forgiving. Staying on top requires reinvention at a pace even Drake may struggle to match. What's most telling is that the conversation around Drake has shifted from anticipation to evaluation. People don't ask, "What will he do next?" They ask, "Where does he stand now?" That's the difference between momentum and maintenance, between being the future and being the present, holding onto relevance. None of this erases Drake's legacy. If anything, it confirms it. You don't have a downfall conversation unless your peak was historic. Drake already changed hip-hop. He already shaped a generation. But legacy doesn't guarantee dominance. It guarantees remembrance. There's still a path forward. Reinvention is possible. Silence is powerful. Risk can be reclaimed. But that requires letting go of control, comfort, and expectations. It requires stepping into uncertainty, something Drake hasn't needed to do in years. The culture isn't asking Drake to disappear. It's asking him to evolve again, to surprise it, to scare it, to remind people why his presence once felt inevitable. That's a difficult challenge for someone who already conquered everything. Hip-hop never punishes success, it punishes stagnation. And stagnation doesn't look like failure. It looks like stability without excitement, familiarity without urgency. Drake stands at a rare crossroads. One path leads to graceful longevity, respected, successful, but no longer defining the era. The other leads back into the unknown, where risk, discomfort, and potential greatness still exist. The question isn't whether Drake has fallen. The question is whether he's willing to jump again. Because in hip-hop, the crown is never taken. It's set down quietly when the moment moves on. And the moment is always watching. If you've been watching this shift happen in real time, you're not alone. Hip-hop is changing fast, and moments like this separate legends from eras. The question isn't whether Drake is talented. It's whether he can adapt to a culture that never waits. And that's exactly why this conversation matters. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Is this just another phase Drake will outgrow? Or are we witnessing the quiet end of an era? Do you think he still has one more reinvention left? Or has the moment already moved on? Make sure you like the video if this breakdown made you think differently. And subscribe for more deep dives that go beyond headlines and hype. We don't chase trends here, we analyze them. Because hip-hop history isn't written later. It's happening right now.